All right, good morning. I'm told we have a quorum, so we're going to jump right into it. Next item that we need to do is approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion? Have a second? Any corrections on the minutes as put in your packet? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Is there anyone here wishing to offer any public comments as we begin today's meeting? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have two action items that we need to deal with. Both of them require a public hearing. First of all, let's get some information on these, and then we'll move off into approvals and listening for public comments on that. We'll turn it over to Daniel.
All right, slide there. So as a reminder, this is our short-term work program that covers a 4-year span. We are currently on the fiscal years 23 to 26 tip cycle. You'll get an update later in the meeting about our move to the 26 to 30 update cycle. But for the purposes of these amendments, we are updating the tip that we have currently been working on. The tip lists all the regionally significant and federally funded transportation projects in the MPO planning area. It's consistent with the regional transportation plan. As you all know, we've also been working to update that. And it is fiscally constrained by federal appropriations or estimated revenues. The current TIP has programmed over $2.5 billion, and again, that's for a 4-year work program for 23 to 26. And that's about just over half of that comes from the FHWA, about 10% from FTA. You can kind of see the breakdown there. State and local revenue in the teens. And we have 3 amendments for today. The first one is the Goodlettsville traffic flow and signal upgrades, which you can see in your packet the details of. We're revising funds on this amendment. It replaces an FY25 local line of $421,416 with an equivalent amount of CMAQ funding. That's an award from the TDOT Air Quality Office. And it goes ahead and, for simplification, combines the construction lines into an FY26 line. The next amendment is Murfreesboro Memorial Boulevard traffic signal improvements. This adds $1.15 million in local funding to construction. It also moves $32,000 in STBG funding from the construction phase to a P design. And then we've updated the total project cost to $3,286,135. The final amendment today is requested by TDOT and Thompson Station. This is the first of the SPP rounds. You'll see several more of these coming through, but we're going ahead and getting started on the statewide partnership awards. This is the Thompson Station section of the Columbia Pike SR6 widening from Thompson's Ridge Road, Bugner Road to Tollgate Boulevard. So we're programming in the adding $4.3 million in local funds to FY26 for PE-NEPA and PE design phases, which replaces an old $1 million NHPP. You'll see in the new tip that we're going to be talking about, 26 to 30, future years will have that statewide partnership match on it. So this is going ahead and getting the local match program to get the project started here.
All right, thank you, Daniel. So we need to hold a public hearing on resolution TPB 2026-01. Anyone wishing to speak on this resolution before we move forward? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to place TPB 2026-01 on the floor. We have a second. Any discussions? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Next action item is TPB 2026-02, and I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take the presentation this morning, but quickly turn it over to the team if you have any questions that are in the details. But I'm bringing to you the draft Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal years 2026 through 2030, this once adopted and then subsequently integrated into the STIP to be certified by Federal Highway and Federal Transit would replace or supersede the current 23-26 TIP. Please note there's an overlap year between the two transportation improvement programs, namely the fiscal year 2026 fund year. The intent is for the 2026 year and the current TIP and the 2026 year and the new TIP to be identical. So there'll be some maintenance that we've got to do to both databases, both documents until such time that this is fully approved, which I think, Stacy, we are expecting at some point in late winter 2026. That's all right. Okay. So a little bit of background here. MPO is required by federal regulations to update their transportation improvement program every 4 years. We're actually ahead of schedule. This month is the 3rd anniversary of the adoption of the current TIP that goes through 2026. The reason for this update is to accommodate the request by TDOT to extend the STIP through 2029. And so our focus with this TIP is to make sure that we're appropriately carrying forward or reflecting the unobligated funding in the current TIP that kind of rolls into fiscal year 2026, where we are now on the schedule, then adds to it any additional projects TDOT needs to have reflected in the STIP located within our region. The third thing that we are incorporated into this draft TIP for your consideration today are the regional groupings of Federal Highway and FTA funds for the life of this TIP. But what we're not doing today is making any funding recommendations for sub-allocated funding on your current TIP projects or new TIP projects associated with the work that we're doing on the regional transportation plan that is scheduled for adoption in 2026. So to recap, the 3 parts of this new TIP are carryover funding on all of your projects, all of TDOT's projects, the new projects that TDOT needs to have reflected in the statewide transportation improvement program that extend beyond 2026, and then the regional groupings that just account for the sub-allocated funding that we distribute through subsequent calls for projects in the coming years of the TIP. I think we had a pretty good discussion about this at the TCC and pretty good clarity there, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about that. We do intend to do a major amendment at the same meeting that we adopt the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan to align the new TIP with the RTP. The RTP is what's going to drive the funding allocations to new projects and new money to existing projects through 2030. And right now you can see a list of the TIP projects that are accounted for and those 3 buckets that I just described online at gnrc.org/app/2050RTP. We've also got this a notice for public review and comment at gnrc.org/transportation/projects, along with a comment form for people to fill out should they have any concerns or questions or ideas about the proposed program. Any questions before I get into some of the highlights?
Just a note, as we've moved existing TIP projects into the 2026, we just had a recent update in the last 2 weeks where the dollar figure for construction estimate was $2.8 million higher than where it had been originally before. Is that something that we can then request in the amendment that's coming up? We'll start to align those programs. Is that the appropriate time to do something like that?
Right, unless the cost overrun or the additional cost that you're having to absorb in the project can be paid for out of the current policy making of the 23-26 TIP. And there are some opportunities, like if you get a commitment from TDOT or we're able to identify funding for a cost overrun from one of our groupings, we can process that as an amendment to the current TIP and just make sure that that 2026 fiscal year stays aligned to the document that is before you this morning. But by and large, you're right, in that if you don't have access to cost overrun groupings, for example, right now, then the decision that this board makes in March regarding the first horizon of the plan will drive the programming of additional dollars. Great question. Okay, so what I want to do is focus on just making sure you're seeing the projects that TDOT has asked us to include in the new TIP that they intend to manage themselves across our region. And the dollar amounts that you're going to see on the screen are the total amount programmed in the new TIP that would be derived from federal sources, state dollars, and any contributions that you may have identified from local sources of funding. So for example, the I-24 Choice Lanes project is a project they've asked us to include in the new TIP. It's also in the current TIP, so this is a carryover project. I didn't check the dollar amounts to see if they were adding any additional funding. I think this matches what's in the current TIP. But we've got 250 million programmed on the I-24 Choice Lanes project in the current TIP, and that's largely for pre-construction activities to help you get through the final design with the project developer. Is that correct, Stacey? So that's the only multi-county project that we have identified from TDOT going into the new TIP. The one exception to that really is the first project on this list, which is State Route 65 spot improvements. This goes a little bit into Robertson County, but it's predominantly investments scheduled for Davidson County. This is in the current TIP, and you see there the amount of money TDOT has asked us to include in the new TIP for that project. And then the I-40 interchange at McCrory Lane, which is on the west side of Davidson County, about the Pegram area. They've asked us to include 29.8 million of federal, state, and any local dollars for that project. But that is it for Davidson County in terms of what TDOT has submitted to us in terms of funding on state managed projects that they want reflected in the new TIP. Rutherford County, we got 3 projects identified here. North Thompson Lane widening project with $125.3 million pledged in the new TIP for that project. This is a combination of, again, federal, state, and local dollars that may be on that project. We've got the Old Fort Parkway widening project with $9 million, and then interchange at Buchanan Road along I-24 in the TIP for $50.8 million. Sumner County, we've got Chair Callis's Portland bypass for $105 million, and project that's been on the books for a long time is this connector to US 31 to connect State Route 386 through that sort of interesting situation on the ground at Sonnersville and the CSX Railroad. $45.6 million has been requested for inclusion in the new TIP. In Williamson County, we've got 3 projects identified. 2 of them relate to State Route 6, Columbia Pike widenings. The sections in Spring Hill and Thompson Station have both been identified. Some amount of federal, state, or local funds, $28.2 million for the Spring Hill section, $59.2 million for the Thompson Station section, and we've got the Mac Hatcher Parkway South Quadrant funding in the amount of $2 million that they've asked us to include in the TIP. I believe this is a 10-year plan project as well. The bulk of the funding for this project is outside of the horizon of the 2030 TIP. I think TDOT currently has that identified as a 2033 project.
30. I've got John, 32 or 33, one of the two.
That's why if you see a discrepancy there in the amounts that you're expecting, that would explain that. And then we end here on Wilson County with 3 projects: Central Pike widening and the TIP for $50.7 million. An interchange project at Central Pike for just under 2, and then the I-40 widening project between 840 and State Route 26, which is also US 70, and the TIP for $87.2 million. We didn't note any additional projects from the state located in Murray County, but if that doesn't jive with your understanding of the 10-year plan and the 3-year work program, we can follow up. So if you don't see a project of interest on any of those slides, then we haven't documented TDOT's commitment to funding in the new TIP as of yet. And it could be the case that your project's listed in the 10-year plan, but likely for funding scheduled outside the 2030 horizon. Any questions about these TDOT projects?
I do remember we took some of our unallocated funds and they went to TDOT. Seemed like it was 70 something billion. Where's that now?
Yeah, we manage that in our fiscal constraint tracking as though we're still our funds. It's essentially just a back office swap of the funding code that is used for the obligation process. I don't know the current balance of the amount been swapped, but some of that has already been, some of the statewide STBG has been obligated on some of our regional projects as a return of the obligation authority. I can give you that balance. It's sort of there haven't really been any obligations since about August, right? When do the books open back up? Are they open now? Okay. So we'll probably start seeing some additional obligations in the near future. Hopefully some of those will be the return of obligation authority for our regional projects.
On the current slide, the I-40 interchange Central Pike, 1.9 million. Is that because it's just engineering and design? The construction's outside the scope of this timeframe?
That's likely the case. And we've got those details in the tip sheets that are on the website. We can have staff pull that up during the project. So I can answer.
I'm just curious, the description, the dollars don't match.
Yes. So these should not be confused with project cost. It's just the amount that we've identified in the schedule for programming on the fiscal years that are incorporated into the new tip. All right. So I'll move on to TDOT groupings. These are statewide pots of money and an anticipation of their use within our region. So this is these dollar amounts are a share of what is available statewide for these groupings, the share that TDOT anticipates obligating within our region. There's a TDOT grouping for National Highway Performance Program projects. These are typically projects focused on improving the national highway system and the interstate system. And we've got the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is statutorily required to be set aside for safety improvements on the federal aid network, the amount of $35.3 million total on the tip. And then we've got the project grouping for the SDBG program for $72.5 million. A lot of this is going to state route improvements within our region, but on locations that are not yet known or have not yet been disclosed to us by TDOT. And then we've got this travel congestion and clean air improvement program in the tip for $4 million. And I don't recall off the top of my head what the funding code for this is, but the team will know that based on information we've got online. But those are the 4 groupings in the tip for TDOT, and TDOT will, as they identify projects to receive funding from these groupings, it's a matter of practice for our MPO that we like to go ahead and move those funds over to the individual projects, especially if they're capacity projects. But it could be the case that TDOT obligates funding out of these groupings. And then we just record that obligation in the project notes for these groupings so that we all know where this money is going. I don't know, Stacey, if you want to say anything more about the groupings and how you intend to manage those over the next 4 fiscal years.
I think the way you said it, yeah, that's exactly right. I don't know if Jay has anything he wants to add on that, but obviously it kind of gives us some flexibility there to manage all those groupings of projects and, depending on the timing and project readiness and how that all factors in to get the project that's ready to go in.
And the last category of projects that we have programmed into the tip are the regional groupings. These are pots of money from specific grant programs that we administer through separate calls for projects. So for example, this carbon reduction program, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th one down on this list, that is a grant program that's suballocated to our region. We program the full, the anticipated amount of that funding source for the next 4 or 5 years, put it into the tip, and then we'll issue calls for projects upon the adoption of the tip to identify where that money is going to be spent across the region. Very similar to what TDOT will do with their groupings. But you see on this list, other set aside, some of these are SDBG funds, the data acquisition program, the advanced planning program, the active transportation program, the technology transit program. Those are sub-allocated SDBG funds to the MPO, and we have policies in the RTP that require a certain amount of that funding to be set aside for these specific uses. The data acquisition program was actually created with CRISA funding a couple of years ago. We're spending about $1 million a year procuring data and research that can be used by local governments and traffic operations and planning. We also use it at the regional level for our congestion management process, but that's funding for those data tools. The advanced planning program, this is a grouping that was recommended by the project delivery task force that Mayor Reed chaired to provide funding to local governments who have proposed improvements that will require some complexity to get through, anticipated right-of-way acquisition or utilities relocation. That task force identified the need to put some investment, the upfront planning to better prepare cost estimates and a schedule for project delivery. So we weren't getting into, programming money for lots of money for a project that had a lot of unknowns associated with them. So this is a pot of money that would be available to you upon the approval of this board to invest in advanced planning for these projects. Very similar to what TDOT does right now on their projects on state routes. So they do advanced planning reports or transportation planning reports to try to demystify or simplify or bring to bear an understanding of the complexities that might be associated with the project that they are advancing. The active transportation program, the technology and transit program, these are SDBG funds that are set aside. We've been setting aside funds since 2010 for the purposes of issuing calls for projects to local governments with sidewalks, bicycle lanes, safety improvement projects, investments in transportation technology or public transit across the region. So that's the carryover money from the current TIP plus the new allocations from the set asides. And then you see we wrap up this list starting with the urban transit program and then moving our way down this list. These are the FTA formula funds that we program into the TIP as a grouping, and then we work with our transit agencies upon the TIP's adoption to identify what specific projects those dollars go to. So you'll see in the coming year amendments to the TIP to distribute money from these groupings to individual projects. So those are the highlights of what you can expect to find online in the tip sheets. That is in addition to your local projects that you're still working on, where you have money programmed but not yet obligated. The intent was to just carry all that forward. There's still some issues with making sure it's the right dollar amounts on these tip sheets. The 2026 year that matters, the one in the current tip, because that's the one in place. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand how much of the money in the current TIP has been obligated, and we don't want to carry forward obligated funding. That would be double counting the revenue. So we'll continue to work with you all to make sure that the 2026 year of the current TIP is fully aligned with the 2026 year of the new TIP. Mr. Chair, that is it for the staff presentation. All that to say, we are asking for adoption this morning. It's been out for public review comment. We haven't received any comments from the public, but we have noted some requested revisions to tip sheets from locals in the state pertaining to the carryover funds that are in the currently adopted transportation improvement program.
Thank you, Michael. This action requires a public hearing. So is there anyone wishing to speak on TPB 2026-02 at this time? Seeing none, we need a motion to get on floor. To have a motion? Have a second?
Second.
Any questions on TPB 2026-02?
I'm looking up. We've not completed our review yet, so we'll abstain until we complete that, and we'll address comment. We'll have comments and address with staff.
Thank you. Any other comments? All in favor say aye. All opposed. Next up is some informational items, the regional transportation plan. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll get this started and then turn it over to Matthew here in a minute. I do appreciate Stacy's comment, though. If you take a look at the resolution that's in your packet, you'll see an acknowledgement of the amendment that we'll have to do in March to align the TIP to the new plan and to incorporate comments from the state and federal partners. So thanks for that. All right, so I'll get it started with a look at we show this slide at each meeting. It's just a look at our major milestones for the development of the major update to the transportation plan. Starting with the call for projects back in January. We've been in the weeds with your staff and TDOT and the transit agencies since then. Whether it be at a county level workshop with all the participating jurisdictions or one-on meetings in person or one-on meetings online. So just a lot of back and forth between the communities. We've also been engaged with consultants to do some technical analysis that helps us identify long-range needs of the region. And then maybe more importantly for today's discussion is we've been engaged with CDM Smith and Finish to help us with cost estimates for the projects that you've applied for through the application system online. I know many of you submitted cost estimates, but a lot of those estimates, as you made us aware, were a little bit dated or based on rough planning estimates of the consultants. Took a look at your project and did just a little bit more detailed analysis of what you might expect in terms of costs. They're working with limited information. It's a project that represents your vision. So they made certain assumptions that might have led to a cost estimate from them that was significantly higher or significantly lower than what you submitted to us. And one of the things that is left to do before we present a draft fiscally constrained plan is to reconcile those differences in cost estimates, which need to be buttoned up before we can start allocating funding from that long range budget to projects for the 3 horizons that are incorporated into the plan. So we are going to be asking this body to convene on December 10th for a look at that first draft. In a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Matthew to talk about the 3 things that we're working on that we need to complete before we get that to you. But looking ahead, when you get that draft, here's what you can expect to find in it. 6 chapters and a set of technical appendices that walk you through the requirements of the planning process as dictated by CFRs, the representation of how we have collaborated as a region, and analysis of our transportation needs into the long term out to the year 2050, the policy guidance that this board and the TCC have helped us formulate that is guiding the recommended allocations of funding for the next 25 years. And then a document assessment and demonstration of fiscal constraint against the budget of anticipated revenues through 2050. And then guidance on the implementation of the plan itself, starting with the programming of those funds into the transportation improvement program, subsequent obligation, and then the project delivery process. And the technical appendices typically speak to supporting documentation that helps folks understand what our processes are for each of those steps. For example, the criteria that we use to evaluate projects for the prioritization list, that is a starting point for determining which projects are going to be in the fiscally constrained list. You'll also have in December an interactive map showing you the status of projects that you applied for, indicating whether or not it is in the fiscally constrained plan, and if it is, which horizon it's scheduled for. We're not going to lose track of the unfunded needs. This will continue to be part of our discussion and part of the mapping. Our work isn't done with the adoption of the plan. That does help get underway projects we've identified funding for, but the work of the region continues as we try to find additional funds for the projects that we're not able to afford within the fiscal constraints of this particular document. You'll also see the proposed projects in relation to things that you say are important to address. So roadway traffic congestion, roadway safety, population and employment growth across the region. So you'll be able to see those projects mapped relative to those assets or those conditions. This is an example of what you can find online right now, representing the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan that was adopted in 2021. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matthew, who's going to talk about the 3 things that we're working on with your staff to help get us to that December 10th presentation.
All right, thank you, Michael, and thank you, TVB. So there are a few things we're working on actively right now to get you that first draft of the plan. I would say
Please don't have a timer. I'm gonna find just some different ones. Okay. Here's the one that I found.
here's some
small.
background
It's
noise for people online. Just have
one for $10.
Oh, great.
And they have
Yeah, perfect. So one kind of theme I'll say generally is we are really nearing the point where we're going to get you a fully fiscally constrained plan. This is the time where we've been interacting with your staff
Throughout, but this is the time
that if they are not in the loop, they should really be getting into the loop and checking in with us. So the 3 things that we're working on now, Michael talked about the first one a little bit already. So we've
next stage, which is getting the state and federal review. So we will see you here on December 10th to take a look at that, but we will be in touch with you and your staff in the meantime, getting materials in front of you. January and February, we'll be responding to some of the state and federal reviews, really polishing and perfecting this to revise the draft document. We will put it into public review comment in the February-March timeline with the final adoption. Looking forward to the March TPP meeting. And of course, major tip amendment to align the tip, the new tip that Michael was talking about with this RTP and all the progress that we made there. So with that, I think we can take questions, Mr. Chair.
Any questions dealing with the regional transportation plan? And let me share this. If you're new to the group and what they're talking about makes no sense to you, I've been there. I know exactly where you are and still don't, I chair it and sometimes it still don't make sense to me either. So have those questions, reach out to staff. If they're not communicating with your staff, have that conversation. You may have a project that needs to be communicated and somebody needs to be told about it. You're unaware of how that works. Just go ahead and reach out to Daniel, Michael, and these guys. Say, hey, listen, I'm not sure how this process works. Can you walk me through that a little bit better? And then communicate with your planning staff or maybe somebody in public works, whoever you've got that's helping you, maybe a grant administrator or something, and they'll ask those questions and work with you. Okay. So make sure you follow through with that. Any questions dealing with this, Jonathan?
I have one comment from a technical aspect for the cost estimates, because that's kind of come out in between the last TCC meeting and this TPB meeting. Are the detailed cost estimates that were come up with available besides just the high level? Is that available online?
Yeah, they're not new. What's new is that we've got more projects loaded. So we've been loading cost estimates for the last few months, and that's been online. And if you go to the application, there's a button to go to cost estimates in tabular form, and then a button that'll launch a box drive where you can download the worksheets.
Awesome.
That give you all the assumptions and calculations for those estimates.
Perfect. That's good. That's going to be the critical component. And I'll just speak from a technical staff aspect. Please get with your technical staff and ask them to do that, because it's critical to be able to look at those detailed cost estimates to see where there may be differences. We have several projects where there's a difference, and the only way for me as someone who does those estimates is to get in and dig in the details. So please encourage your staff to dig in the details.
It's actually worth me just showing that very quickly so you know what to expect.
And I'll say while Michael's pulling that up, we recently did update that with the right-of-way and utility cost estimates. And again, those are drafts. You know, we're working with Banesh. Wally's here in the room if you have questions on that side of things, which is very hard to estimate, but very important for your estimates. So that's a new update. Take a look at that. We want to see your feedback on those.
Thank you, Daniel. You're seeing on screen now the interactive database. You're going to land on the RTP projects tab, which is where you want to be for what I'm going to show you. From here, you can go to cost estimates, and you can see in tabular form all the projects that cost estimates been prepared for. We're not estimating costs for programmatic investments. This is mostly on-road improvement with known termini and a proposed cross-section improvement target. And then from here, you can launch the cost estimates worksheets to see all of the projects. Or you could go to your specific project. This link here takes you to the same place that the button does. Basically, you're going to go to cost estimates, launch this cost estimate worksheets, open up the file share. You're going to see the first folder is the right-of-way and utility cost estimates. These are two spreadsheets. That was all the projects that either right-of-way or utilities have been estimated for. So you'll look for your project in those spreadsheets. For construction cost estimates, you'll find your project by the project ID in the apply app. And then within that folder, you'll be able to see the worksheets prepared by the consultants that will show you the calculations and the assumptions. Now, it is difficult, Box. Some of you might use Box for online storage in your own communities. One of the limitations of it is that there's not a search. So you can't just search for your ID. You're just going to have to sort by folder name essentially, and then kind of paginate to to your project ID. But once you go into that folder, you'll be able to download that information.
Any other questions dealing with that? All right, thank you. We'll go off into our regular reports. First up is TDOT. I'm not sure. We've got Jane Stacy here. Whoever wants to take that.
Yeah, I'll go and then I'll get some statewide updates and then Jay will take over the regional updates. Statewide partnership, statewide, those are about 60 some odd proposals. Those are under review now. They'll go before the governor. Hopefully we'll get as many of those as possible in next year's budget. Likely to see a draft, early next year, and then typically next year the budget will be approved in April. So looking forward to that continuing process. My group, we manage a planning grant program. We have over 60 applications statewide with that. We'll be evaluating those and get to notice of proceeds for those planning projects early next year. So good luck to you all who have submitted proposals. Those are under review as well. We are also undergoing update to our statewide long-range plan. We're currently in a policy update phase that is completing and under review. We appreciate the feedback from planning staff here to get that completed. And then we'll move into a full long-range plan update next year, though you'll be seeing some additional information and we'll be getting more feedback from you all on our statewide long-range plan. Little update from Federal Highway. As you all most likely recall, our 3 planners that primarily assisted in Tennessee all took the buyout. And the safety engineer for Tennessee, Sonia Baker, she's kind of given everything. She's done a great job of keeping everything in her review, but just an update. They're getting assistance from West Virginia and Mississippi from Federal Highway staff there. We've not had delays, but everything's kind of getting right up to the minute on review periods and things like that. So looking forward to some additional help from Federal Highway there. So more coming, I'll keep you all informed on that. So that's my primary updates. If nobody has any questions, I'll go to Jay for his regional updates.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate the time. As everybody aware, Thanksgiving is next week. In the church calendar, Easter is the high point of the year. For TDOT, Thanksgiving is the high point of the year. So we're picking up trash and making sure everything looks good. So we will not have any lane closures after Wednesday at noon to help support travel. Interstate 40 is pretty brutal during the Thanksgiving holidays. There's a lot of queuing on it, and we'll have extra help support out there to make sure there's quick clearance, things are moving. If you have any maintenance grievances before Thanksgiving, find me after the meeting, and we'll work through those. Be glad to do those. On the development side, I want to brag on our team. We've got John Story and Sean Armstrong in the back room, my directors over development. Region 3 has delivered at 100% for the last 3 years. So I know in the past there's we've had a lot of projects in development, and some would get delivered and some wouldn't. We do not like to move projects anymore. And if they are moved, there's hard conversations had. And our team's done a very good job. So with that said, this next year we did a lot of work this year. So you're going to see things slow down on the construction side. I mean, the work we have out there, you're going to see it, it's moving, but there's not going to be any large highway projects other than Thompson Lane and Murfreesboro in the next year. We're going to be buying a lot of property. And so Sean helped me, about 400 tracks. We're hitting it hard. That's a lot, just so you know, that's a lot of acquisitions. And then we will still have roughly half of our program with state of good repair. So resurfacing, bridge repairs, economic development, safety projects, those are going to continue. But the larger projects we're buying property for next year. So I wanted to forecast, talk to you all about what's happening. Mayor, we enjoyed having the groundbreaking a couple weeks ago for the Portland bypass. We're very excited about that project.
Enjoyed having you there.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. I did want to mention that TDOT is moving. Region 3 is staying where it's at, but our corporate office is sliding over a block from James K. Polk Building that we've been there since 1982 to the Tennessee Tower, which is a block to the west. I wanted to make everybody aware of that. If you show up for a meeting, make sure you're going to the right place. So our leadership will be moving next week. And there'll probably be a slightly different process to check in. They want to allow yourself a little time to get situated. I'm going to have to do that myself. I haven't been there yet either. So that I just want to make everybody aware of that. Finally, the last two things is on the local programs front. I think our team is making some strides, making improvements in that area. But if you get stuck, call me, and I can help push those things along. I know that everybody in here, I think everybody's raised an eyebrow at me. We can help move those along. Just I want to make sure that y'all are getting the service you need, and y'all are waiting on us. So feel free to reach out to me. And the last thing I want to mention is we've had a slew of challenges with access. What I mean by that is we have developers wanting to tie to our system and do things that it's either they've got city or county approval and they have plans, they come show us to it and they want to start tomorrow, or they just don't want to do anything we say. And we've dealt with both. And I understand that we need to support economic development, but the last thing we want to do is make a safety or operations challenges for your communities. We have to balance that. And if y'all need us to be the bad guy, we will gladly wear the black hat for y'all and do that. I think we have to protect our system and do things that are smart. So my ask would be this, is, as folks come to meet with y'all, we love to be a part of those conversations on the front end. I mean, we could draw on napkins and talk about what we think should be happening. We can usually give some good advice, and we don't want a company to spend a lot of money on developing a plan, and then we have to change it. And they get frustrated. We're frustrated. Y'all are frustrated. So if we can be a part of that, we'd be glad to. But I just want to remind everybody about that. Is we're having some challenges there, and we want to be an advocate for your communities and protect our system. So if you could include my team in that, I would greatly appreciate it. That's it for me, Chairman. Thank you.
Any questions, T-Dot, while they're here? There's going to be a take a ticket, take a number situation to meet with Jay afterwards. He said he's going to get it all done before Thanksgiving. I think is what you said, right?
It's time told they had to pull the grievances. Be over here listening.
All right, next we'll move to Jonathan for our TCC chair report.
I would say that the TCC went fairly quickly. We basically talked about the same things y'all have here today, so I don't really have much to offer other than what I offered earlier about. Please remind everybody and your technical staff, please dig into those estimates. It's critical that you dig into those estimates.
And if you don't have someone on your staff that's able to go, you don't have someone currently going to TCC, I'm sure they'd be glad to let you have somebody come in there. You learn a lot.
Absolutely.
Those meetings,
Always a lot.
you can get online or meet with them there in person as well. Just far as the chair's report, I want to say we had a December 17th programming committee, or what we call the task force, that was going to be meeting down here. Let's meet online. I think Daniel will send out, talk to Chairman Kerr about that. He's going to send out a link. We'll do it online. Since it's the 17th, I think we're going to be bottled up on getting everybody in a room one more time down there. So we'll do it online, free up your travel. And then we'll get back at after the first year, start meeting, because I know that Mayor Reed wants to provide lunch probably for us again.
He's happy to provide.
See, that's what we got to do. So
Always happy to eat it.
we're always happy to eat.
I'm glad you said that instead of me.
So you'll be getting an email out about a Teams meeting. It'll be coming up December 17th if you're on that programming committee that we'll be looking at. So I don't have anything else. Don't forget the December 10th meeting. We have to come in here on 10:15. We're going to meet here. So I hope there'll be another reminder on that be coming out as well. And so just turn it over to Michael for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we just brief report for you, but before we get into it, do want to underscore a couple of things that have been mentioned. One is what Jay just said. If your planning department doesn't engage TDOT in the development review process, we strongly encourage that. And if you need any assistance getting that arrangement set up, we're happy to help. We also employ local community planners who are pretty familiar with the development review process. It can bring some ideas to the table about how you can accommodate TDOT's review of any impact to the state rail system. I think that's a great idea. The other thing, as Mayor Callis mentioned, there are a lot of new faces around the table. There's new staff at GNRC, there's new staff at TDOT. There's been a lot of change in the membership on the TCC and the TPB since we last adopted the RTP and the Transportation Improvement Program. It's not complicated, but it's a very complex process that is important to you all in terms of getting your projects on the radar of the state and in a position for federal grant funds. And we don't want the mystery around the process to get in the way of your engagement. So we're happy to do whatever is necessary to make sure that you feel comfortable with everything that we're doing. But for our report, we'll get started with our tip status report, which is a regular report that we make to the board every other month. I'll turn it over to Daniel for that.
All right, so we have our report as of November 6th here. The last time you saw it, it was as of September 3rd. So we got about 2 months update here. Our percentages, we're at 65% of FHWA funds obligated and 79% tip period elapsed. So obviously we got a little bit of a gap there that looks kind of similar to last time. And obviously we want to continue kind of helping to accelerate that project delivery. As always, reach out. Now the silver lining there is that we did add more money to the pot. So which made that harder to, we obligated actually about, I want to say we obligated about $29 million in that time. It was the end of the federal fiscal year. And there's always a bunch that comes through then, which is great. But we also added about 60 million in programmed funds. So that's why the percentage didn't change too much to close that gap there. We added about 5 new projects to programming and initiated a couple more.
Thank you, Daniel. Then I'll wrap up here, which is a look at upcoming meetings. We'll have the TCC back in this room on December 3rd. That'll be primarily focused on the regional transportation plan that we talked about today. But that same day in the evening, we have our annual partner appreciation and annual awards reception at Nissan Stadium West Club, 5 to 7 p.m. We are asking you to register for that. We're also asking you to bring staff members of your local legislative body just to get engaged in a regional celebration of the work that we do together. The registration for that is online at gnrc.org/RSVP. And then December 10th, as the chair mentioned, we'll reconvene in this room to go through the draft plan. Very next day, we have a convening of our environmental roundtable, which pulls together resource agencies at the state and federal level with nonprofits and local planners to discuss a range of environmental issues. This particular meeting is going to be focused on the discussion of the emissions reduction strategies that we've identified for our regional emissions reduction plan that we're developing on behalf of our full MSA and GNRC footprints with funding from EPA. We're focused on emissions reduction strategies that only improve air quality, but also save businesses and households and governments money. And then December 17th, instead of meeting here in this office, we'll do the online meeting to kick off the newly formed programming committee, which is another one of the recommendations from the Project Delivery Task Force that Mayor Reed chaired. That is all that I've got. Anything else from the team before we turn it back to the chair?
Any other business to come before the board today? And just as a reminder, as Mayor Moore mentioned, when you get those numbers about that swap, those funds, send that out to everybody in the group. That'd be a good informational thing to have. All right, we're looking for one more motion today. Second. All in favor, aye. All right, happy Thanksgiving. See you soon.